So my first love is Field of Dreams from 1989. The plot summary: Iowa farmer Ray Kinsella is inspired by a voice he can't ignore to pursue a dream he can hardly believe. Supported by his wife, Ray begins the quest by turning his ordinary cornfield into a place where dreams can come true. This is directed by Phil Alden Robinson, starring Kevin Costner, James Earl Jones, and Ray Liotta. So this definitely was the first movie that I saw of Kevin Costner. This is one of those movies as a young kid was definitely like in heavy rotation. Be on
Mm,
TV, I'd watch it. I'd rent it at the video store. Put the impression of Kevin Costner being sort of the quintessential American guy, Midwest, cornfield, baseball, like all those things kind of rolled into one. And I also just love this story too, like around the same time when I was in probably like sixth or seventh grade, like read the book this was based on, and it was a great
mm,
book, and then saw the movie again. And this movie, I just think for me was always a classic as a kid, and a lot of it was to do with Kevin's persona and how he could handle a movie, which is, especially upon this rewatch too, incredibly cheesy, like incredibly like full
yeah.
on, cheese schmaltz. But it absolutely worked for me a lot as a kid when I didn't even realize it was that cheesy, with like the score being really heavy-handed by James Horner,
Hmm.
and these really sweeping, epic kind of camera shots in these cornfields where it's like this is kind of cornfield, but it really works. And there's heavier themes here at play too around dreams and letting go of the past and relationships with the father, which is again a sort of a quintessential kind of American thing too, with
Hmm.
masculinity there as well. And it gets me every time at the end of the movie when he asks his dad to play catch. It's just like
Mm.
it's super cheesy, but it totally works. And I think that also encapsulates Costner to me too. He's cheesy, but he can work. And I still love this movie a lot. I think it's a classic, throwback to like a Jimmy Stewart, Frank Capra kind of thing for a modern
Totally.
audience. I'm curious what you thought of this baseball cheese here. What were
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I'd never seen it, which is, kind of shameful to admit, but like I said, he just never really made it to India. And then, of
Hmm.
course, I've been aware of this movie forever, but just never really had a chance to watch it. And I don't know, I totally agree. Like it works. It just is so earnest and sincere. But I think even though it's cheesy, first of all, I'm totally okay with cheese. Second of all, cheese works when the people making it really believe in it.
Hmm.
And it shows, right? Every fabric of this movie, every performer, every choice that was made, everybody behind in front of the camera, they're all bought in. And I
Hmm.
think when you see that, no matter what you might be putting up on screen, if people come together and buy into something, the product is going to be great and people are going to love it. And because it does touch something, like you said, those themes are universal and those
Hmm.
themes are true to who we are as people, and they do a great job to just touch that, and it's amazing. And to the point that you start to think that, oh, are all these people real? And it's such a clever thing with James Earl Jones's character. Like I kept wanting to read up, like, is this a real author? Because some
Yeah.
of the other people are like, that's
Yeah.
such a clever trick of the book, I guess, and then of the script as well. And again, perfect casting,
Hmm.
and everybody is great. Like I think his wife, who I was not expecting to be this person who's kind of a firecracker and supports him but also has her own mind, and
Hmm.
that whole scene in the town hall assembly, whatever, where she like
Right.
really explodes, like incredible stuff. And just their home life and the dream. Like I wanted to move to the cornfields and do this. Like it was so amazing. Like it kind of really draws you in. But at the center of it is him, obviously. I mean, he looks amazing, first of all,
Hmm.
but has this kind of amazing intelligence, but also not intellectual, believes in something, but is also not dumb,
Hmm.
is confident but also vulnerable. It's such a amalgamation of so many different emotions. And this could have been played in a very stereotypical way, that somebody who's very corny and believes in all the things, or somebody who's maybe too hard edged, and he's none of those all the way to the extreme. This is a kind of in the center character, and just his physicality, like he doesn't say much, but
Hmm.
every move of his face and his body, like all that is just so perfectly calibrated that you just can't look away. It just has so much screen presence and star power and charisma, but it feels very grounded. And there's a famous thing, right, that he's been talking about even on the Horizon part one press tour that they originally were thinking of casting Robin Williams, and they said the director was like, well, if Robin Williams heard voices in the cornfield, people are gonna be like, of course, because Robin Williams probably does hear voices.
Yeah.
Versus, if you, as Kevin Costner, are hearing voices in the cornfield, people are going to struggle with that in a good way. That they'll
Hmm.
come on board. That, oh yeah, if he's hearing it, something must be up.
Mm.
And that is so true. Yeah, this movie is incredible, and I wish I'd seen it before as a kid, and now I'll be watching it more and more.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about the character he represents and sort of this simple but not dumb. And to me, that is the version of American kid from the Midwest is a simple guy, but not stupid
Yeah,
and has a belief in something and will fight for it. And is a lot about, family issues too, where he's, wanting to connect with his dad to make sure he also connects with his daughter and all this kind of stuff like that. That is, again, why I think from the get-go, I was always associating Kevin with this like idea of the American
right.
male. I also, it was funny too when you mentioned James Earl Jones' character. As a kid, I did think that was a real guy, like the real author. I did and even when I read the book when I was like, I don't know, like 10 or 11, I'm like, oh, cool. This is like this real guy. Who is he? And this is before the internet. So I couldn't like Google the name and
Right.
realize like, oh, wait a second, this is fake. But it just lends sort of this air of importance in the story and in the film. And on this watch too, what struck me is, similar to what I was mentioning in The Bodyguard, just in terms of like the structure being so great. This movie's not very long, and in the first
No.
5 minutes, he's in the cornfield hearing voices.
Right.
Like, there's not a giant like, okay, we got to establish what's going on here, and like, who's this person? What's his backstory? They get right into the story
Hmm.
beat of like what's going to happen in this movie, and it's very economical in terms of
Hmm.
how it moves. And I respected a lot on this second watch of like, oh, this movie's actually very well paced,
Yeah.
written, moves, and isn't very long. And I think that's why, as a kid, I could watch this. It's like an hour and a half, or maybe even under an hour and a half. So when I'm like 10, it's easy to put this on as opposed to something that's like 2 hours. When you're a kid, that feels like an eternity, let
Yeah.
alone something like a Lawrence of Arabia. It's like 3 hours. Like I don't even know what that time means. That's
Right.
like the entire length of a day. So this works really well too. And again, it was funny that I was mentioning in Bodyguard with the Yojimbo piece, there is a scene in this movie too where they're showing Jimmy Stewart's Harvey, which
Right.
is the movie where he's talking to a potentially invisible rabbit. And
Right.
I think that's again an illusion of like, oh, I'm doing Jimmy Stewart. We're gonna put in a scene referencing this Jimmy Stewart, and also hearing voices in the same way. So that caught me of like, oh, okay, I see. I'm
Yeah.
sure that was a Kevin note. I mean, I don't know, but I feel like that's something that he would want to just, put a little lampshade on that and be like, yeah, this is me, is my Jimmy Stewart phase.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And then we didn't even mention Burt Lancaster. Like,
Yeah.
all these people are cast for a reason, and they bring a lot of, it's really smart because they bring a lot of depth and grounding to the movie. Otherwise, this
Hmm.
movie could feel a little bit too airy and wishy-washy. And I think it's just really smart. And on the American Ideal, they sell it. And maybe it is marketing, but often if something is being marketed, I think there is a kernel of truth there. And then the marketing becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that is about the greatness of this country, I think. Because
Hmm.
anybody else could have marketed this, but they didn't. Or if they tried to, they didn't do a good job. And not all places became what this place became. So, and this thing of a simple guy who's not dumb but believes in something and is going to go out there and do it, that doesn't exist in a lot of places. Coming from I grew up in a different place, and
Hmm.
this is not what people are driven by. I can't generalize, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I
So,
think
and
that's
he
that's true.
sells it.
Exactly. Yeah, he totally does. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great film. So I'm glad they built it and you came, I guess. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.